Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. I'm your host Ajay Vasish with The Weekender on Sunday. Welcome to the show amid a second lockdown. Center stage in New Zealand this last week and around the world have been the following stories. India celebrated its 73rd Independence Day. Aap sabko bhi slightly belated Swatantrata Divas ki shubhkamnaएं. New Zealand went back on alert level 2 outside of Auckland, and Auckland remains at alert level 3 till midnight, the 26th of August. Travel into and out of Auckland through this period is heavily restricted to stop the possible spread of COVID-19. Coronavirus is continuing its spread across the world with about 21 million confirmed cases in 188 countries. More than 750,000 people have lost their lives. This situation is unfettered, uncontrollable, and it seems we have no idea how the hell we're going to get out of this. But we're all trying really hard. For New Zealand, the story, while on a smaller scale, is still worrying. COVID-19 in New Zealand as of the 16th of August had 1,600 confirmed 19 cases, with about 7 more cases announced overnight. The recoveries have been 1,531, and the deaths in all have been 22. Active cases at this point in time, with those 7 added overnight, are at 56. We are 137th on the global case list. In fact, we are quite a way down the list out of that 155, and the countries at the top of that heap are USA, Brazil, India, and Russia. They occupy the top 4 spots in that order. Now, as we go through today's discussion, I think there's a question to be asked about whether or not New Zealand's response is going to be the right one, given that we've just gone into a second lockdown. Over 1 million New Zealanders have also downloaded the New Zealand COVID Tracer app. And before we go to our next meeting, there is one bit of sad news. Sad in a nice way. MS Dhoni has announced his retirement from international cricket. उसके बारे में भी बात करेंगे आपसे और अभी साथ देते रहिएगा. In our head-to-head series, today our guest is the Honourable Michael Wood, member from Mount Roskill from the Labour Party. He was first elected on the 3rd of December 2016 and he's been a member in 2 consecutive governments in 2 consecutive, not governments, government only once, 51st and 52nd parliaments. He's the Labour MP for Mount Roskill and the senior whip. He also handles all these other areas of business committees, officers in Parliament, standing orders, and the Parliamentary Services Commission. In fact, welcome to the show, Michael. How are you doing?
Oh, good afternoon. Really good to be here with you. And
it's good to have you on board.
Good. I spent my weekend getting used to Zoom meetings again, so good to be here with you.
Yes, I'm getting used to it as well. We have technical glitches all the time. Welcome to the world of COVID, the new abnormal.
That's right, but we're all doing well.
We're all doing well. We are doing very well, yes. So let's start with that position you have on the PSC. What does that entail? And how are you making a difference with that role in Parliament?
Yes, so in my role as whip, one of the things that you get to do is to work on a range of committees and bodies that have to do with effectively the way that Parliament functions. Mm-hmm. And so the PSC is the Parliamentary Services Commission. And I sit on that with the Speaker, the whips from the other parties, and a few other people. And our job is to kind of be a cooperative body across the different parties of Parliament, mm-hmm. To deal with a range of issues So, for example, at the moment, there's having to be a big process of moving around the buildings at Parliament because the lease is expiring on one. So the parties need to negotiate and work out how that's going to function between us.
Right.
One of the good things about New Zealand Parliament is even though we disagree between our parties, we still retain a functional Parliament where we have relationships and we can work through issues together. And
are you telling me, sorry to interrupt you, are you telling me the Beehive is out on lease to the government?
Oh, not the Beehive, but one of the buildings next door to Parliament House, Bowen House. No, not the Beehive. I don't think anyone else would go in there. But that's just an example of the kinds of issues that we work together on.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So how many people on that committee with you?
Oh, I think from memory, I think there might be about 9 of us or so on that committee. Right. And it's one of those committees where we tend to do things by consensus. We try and work through different issues, discuss them between us, and then try and agree on positions between the parties. rather than sort of having an oppositional thing where we vote on everything.
So you try and
the
sort your differences out outside of the chamber on many
That's right.
things.
That's right. And it's the same with the business committee, which is one of those other committees you mentioned that I'm on. And that committee meets every week when Parliament is on to work out how the Parliament is going to function that week, what bills are going to come up, how long they'll take, what speaking slots people will have, how select committees are going to work. And I do just really highlight this to people because you look at political systems like, for example, the United States, where not only do the parties disagree, they actively have a legislature that doesn't really function, and the opposition party tries to make it gridlock. In New Zealand, we are very fortunate that we don't have that. We actually have a parliament that, for the most part, actually functions, and then we have our political debates within it. And I think that's a very important thing for us to hold on to, and something we can be quite pleased about in New Zealand.
Perhaps being more from a UK-based parliamentary system, it hasn't got that much of a filibuster approach, or a place where people just get lock their horns and don't come away.
Yeah, I mean, we still have some pretty fierce debates about the issues. There's no doubt about that. We have an adversarial Westminster system, which is meant to be about parties disagreeing with each other and ideas being contested. And I think that's a really good thing, actually. I don't want to lose that either. But I do want to see parties work together so that there's a functional democratic system and a functional legislature. And we do a pretty good job.
What do you feel was the positive around National agreeing with the original response in terms of COVID-19? And Simon Bridges at the time, who was leading the government, was very much leading the opposition, was very much in favour of the response from the Labour Party and the government. But they've been trying to find ways to find cracks in it. Is that something you guys debate outside of the chambers as well? Or is that like, no, it's election time, we have to just face it off?
Yeah, well, look, it's been a really interesting experience over the last few months. So I was on the Epidemic Response Committee, which you mentioned Simon Bridges, and he chaired it. And that was a committee that met while Parliament itself was not able to meet. And so that was actually a good example of the way that the Business Committee said, look, how can we work together to make sure that we have some ongoing democratic oversight and discussion, even though Parliament can't meet? So we met on Zoom like this, and it worked pretty well for the most part. Look, right throughout, there have been differences between the parties. So I think you're right. For the most part, the opposition said they supported the government's response at that time, but they definitely did have some different points of view, which they're absolutely entitled to. I think the main thing that we would say is that it's important that while politicians and parties feel free to express different views if they have those, that we've all got a responsibility to put the public health issue first ahead of any politicking. And I think in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a little bit of that coming through sometimes, which people haven't really liked. So we're just trying to, in the Labour Party, make sure we put the public health issues first, because nothing can be more important than the life and health of our fellow Kiwis.
So are there any facets or points of view that the opposition put forward which you feel would have served you better?
Oh, well, look, I think most people are pretty aware that over the last week, the leader and deputy leader of the National Party kind of brought into and spoke about these sort of conspiracy theories about things being hidden and this kind of carry on, which are just absolute nonsense. And the concern about that is that as politicians, we have all got a responsibility, yes, to say what we believe and to put forward different ideas. But if we start putting forward sort of unproven conspiracy theories and this kind of thing.
So you're saying there was nothing they said that would have helped you better? It's always been a negative spin.
To help the government. And our job's not to help them. Our job is to try and win, and their job is to try and win. No problem with that. Let's all be.
It's not very conciliatory, is it? Where did the bipartisan response go in looking after the country's health?
Yeah, well, that's the main thing. We have all got, as elected leaders, we have got a fundamental responsibility to engage in the debate responsibly. That's what we have tried to do at all times, and we just encourage other parties to do the same as well.
So, just to segue into more about what you bring to the table in your electorate as well as being in Parliament, what facets from your past experiences are serving you best in your current roles?
Yeah. Well, look, there are lots of different things about being an MP, but I find the most interesting is that you're a problem solver. You're constantly saying, we're here right now, we want to get to here, how do we bridge that gap given the resources we have, given the problems that face us, and how do we make progress towards our goals? And so in different jobs and experiences that I've had along the way as a union negotiator, as someone who worked for Habitat Humanity for a period, as someone who spent a few years being the main caregiver at home to my young kids, my job in those respects was constantly about solving problems and trying to make progress, either in my own family or for people that I was representing. And that's kind of what politics is about. And so I always enjoy that challenge of saying, okay, this situation is maybe a bit tricky. How are we going to make it better? I think that fundamentally as politicians, and certainly as a progressive politician from the Labour movement, that's what I enjoy doing. And my past experiences have certainly helped with that.
So, in a manner of speaking, how well you deal with changing the nappies also comes good in government.
Well, it's when you're changing the nappy and the phone is ringing and one of the other kids wants attention and the potatoes are boiling on the stove at the same time, then you've got a problem to solve. And I think every mother or father in the country knows about those days and how you manage with the stress and the competing things, issues on your time. And that's certainly akin to life as a politician sometimes.
I have to admire your point of view because I was thinking about the containment issue within the nappy.
Yeah, we sometimes have to contain problems like that as well. That's true.
Good that you can agree to that or admit to it.
Absolutely.
So actually, that's a good segue. The new COVID-19 cases are on the march across several parts of New Zealand. And in a manner of speaking, it is the proverbial nappy with stuff we don't want in it. It's still contained somewhat. Where do you think we are headed at the moment?
Great question. And I'll say something maybe a little bit unusual first up, which is that anyone who sits in front of you and pretends that they can tell you exactly where we're going to be in 6 months' time or a year's time is pulling your leg, because no one can tell you that with any certainty. 6 months ago, the prospect that 8 months ago, the prospect that we would be facing a major global pandemic was not on anyone's mind. This is an unprecedented period, the global pandemic that we are currently going through. There are still a lot of unknowns about how the virus functions, about the different strains, about how quickly we might develop treatments or a vaccine. And a lot will hinge on how those things unfold. So what we have to do as a government and as a country is focus on what we can control and what's important to us. And I think the thing about New Zealand's response is that we've said very clearly that what we will prioritise is public health and saving people's lives. And we've then shaped an elimination strategy around that, which is
so you'd still agree what you're doing is going early and going hard, and it'll still serve New Zealand is the approach.
Early going hard was the right approach. Because of that, we have saved lives. We have the lowest death rate in the OECD. We have got one of the, despite the recent setback of having to go into level 3 in Auckland, we've managed to retain one of the highest levels of economic and social freedom in the world. So we have actually, through the approach we've had one of the best health outcome and one of the best economic outcomes. And I think that approach is going to serve us well in the time ahead. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, particularly if we do have further cases coming up. But that is something that we said that we would probably have to anticipate and that we would.
But do you think it's something we could ill afford, perhaps, on an ongoing basis? I mean, how do we support a team of 5 million and still maintain the health and still get the economy right? Surely it's untenable on an ongoing basis.
Well, what would be untenable would be to have COVID-19 occurring on a wider basis in our society. That's when you have terrible health outcomes and you have terrible economic outcomes. And that's what we've seen in other countries. That's why we've always said that the best health approach and the best economic approach are pretty much the same thing. If we can manage to eliminate COVID-19, and just to be really clear, elimination means in the first instance, getting out of the community, which we achieved, then understanding that it will from time to time flare up, but having the right strategies and approaches to deal with it quickly and effectively and to get it back out. That's the
approach. Should we perhaps have kept the social distancing and the large mass gatherings away from the menu in between the first and the second lockdown? Maybe that would have been a better response?
Well, that would have been a response we could have had. I think
Yeah.
there's a question about if you have successfully eliminated it from the community, um, there probably isn't such a need to continue having stringent measures operating within your community.
Yes.
The best thing you can do at that point is to have the border controls. So that's the approach
Which is
we've
kind of
taken.
leaky at times. So
Really certain thing in this. We just have to
mhm.
make sure that our systems are as strong as possible to avoid it getting into the country. But no system, particularly when you're dealing with human beings and you're dealing with a
Yes.
biological virus, no system is going to be 100% proof, foolproof. So we've got to make sure that when we do have these instances, that we get on top of it quickly. That's why we took the approach that we took this week. If you look at somewhere like Melbourne, when they
Yes.
had a resurgence in cases, they took weeks and weeks to bring in firm measures, and that's when it got out of control, and that's why they're having such a terrible time now. We
So
took pretty
right now you're in the
decisive
middle of
action.
the second lockdown. You're obviously committed to it, but do you feel there could be something that could be done better in the government's COVID-19 response this time around?
Oh, look, our approach is to constantly be saying, are there
Hmm.
things that we could do better? So the Minister of Health, Chris Hipkins,
Yeah,
for
but
example,
what could you do that would be better? Right now, all the ideas we're playing with have all been utilized in the past as well.
well, so one that the Minister of Health, Chris Hipkins, has identified and spoken about in the last couple of days is around our testing of frontline workers, for example. And so we've
Right,
really
which was an
sharpened
oversight.
up. Yeah, so we've really sharpened up the processes there to make sure that there is testing there. None of these
Hmm.
issues are ever quite as simple as you think. So when you just say, oh, we should test for,
Yeah.
you actually have to have some legal mechanism to compel people, for example, which is a pretty challenging thing to do with the people who you are
Is
most
it
reliant
proving
on.
to be too hard? There's too many balls to juggle and too many things to keep an eye on.
It's one of those absolutely devilish problems. And that's
Yeah.
why the approach that we've taken as a government is to say we need to take strong action. But actually, as a government, what we need to do is to mobilise the support of the whole population. And that's why, right the way through, we've spoken about the team of 5 million. It can't
Yes.
just be a bunch of MPs sitting in Wellington saying things and pressing policy buttons. It needs to be all of us working together. That's what worked the first time when we eliminated the disease, when we
Hmm.
got our death rate down to the lowest in the OECD. And that's what it's going to take to keep on top of the situation, bearing in mind that across the rest of the world, this disease is not slowing down. In fact, it's actually ramping up internationally. So the fact that we're dealing with a contained set of cases in Auckland right now, it's not
Hmm.
ideal. But I could still say to you, you could ask pretty much any person in the world, what country would you want to be in at the moment? Most people around the world would still say New Zealand. So on the whole, we're doing well. But we've just got to keep working, keep calm, keep making good decisions, and keep following the guidelines to keep people safe.
So I'm definitely going to give you that one because I think the responsibility does lie with the rest of us as well. It's not the 100 odd people in the beehive. It's the other 4.9 million and 990 odd or whatever it works out to.
Yeah. But look, the
What
other
could New
thing I would
Zealanders be
say,
doing to make this a more viable proposition this time around?
yeah. Well, look, I think one of the things that has come through over the last week has just
Hmm.
been reminding ourselves about the importance of some of the things that are in place. So,
Hmm.
for example, testing. So, it's
Hmm.
been a little bit of a wake up call to people to say, look, if you are experiencing any symptoms, then do make sure you get a test. So, that's a message we want to keep pushing out there. One of the things that we can do that's really important is to continue having a high level of testing because
Hmm.
that picks up if there is any transmission in the community. And then we've got the tools to go and deal with it through our contact tracing capability. So yesterday we did, I think, 24,000 tests, most of
Hmm.
them in Auckland. That's actually an extraordinary number, and it shows how much we've built up the system over recent months. So that's been an area which we've had big improvement in. The other one is
Hmm.
the contact tracing, where I think we're tracking down all of the contacts that people from the original set of cases had, and I think we've tracked down about 85% within 48 hours. So in the public health end, there's a lot that we've learned over the last 6 months and a lot of extra capacity that we've put in there so that
Hmm.
when one of these cases occurs, we can get onto it quickly and squash it back down as effectively as we can in a short period of time.
So it's a handy place to be, and the government response is one that has kept many, if not most, New Zealanders safe and financially cocooned and safer, I guess, from a major impact yet, whether for health or for the economy. How do you think this is going to play out in the upcoming elections? Michael, are you able to hear me? I think we froze him. We're just waiting for Michael to rejoin the conversation. I'm not sure if our editor is with us, or maybe we can go to him in between. Sandeepji, are you part of the conversation yet? Yes. You're my night watchman. Yes, tell me.
Of view, and which again is subject to our interpretation. Like everyone is interpreting these days things differently. Opposition has a point of view. Mainstream media has a point of view. So basically, yeah, it varies, and it's good at this time when things are moving at a very quick, rapid speed. It really pays to calm down and slow down your speed and then listen to arguments, on both sides of the debate. So as we know, what's playing out right now in mainstream media is, I think, Michael has joined us.
We'll let you finish. This will be the unusualness
yes.
of the interview. Welcome back, Michael. You were muted.
Oh, sure. Hi again. Sorry, it just all froze up here.
It's okay. I feel like we're on the same turf now. We were having the same issues. So I'll just finish off with Sandeep, and I'll come back to you if you'll allow that. Sandeepji, you were in the midst of a thought process.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to fill in Michael's forced absence, and I was just trying to give a context to what Michael was saying. And so what Michael was saying was quite rightly the government's point of view. And as I was saying, that these are very uncertain times and things are moving very fast. As we have seen, the virus came back very quickly. And so it's a very fast moving space. We are hearing some government points of view. We are also hearing some, I would say, criticism of government's point of view in the mainstream media. But what I was pointing out was that during these uncertain and fast moving time, it pays well to slow down, calm down, and then try to understand the main argument each side is trying to make. And nobody has got, I would say, a rule book that can be followed. It is still uncharted territory. So it pays well to be a little bit calmer, a little bit. But having said that, I will leave it to you again so that you can continue your discussion with Michael, and then after that we can come back and have a more third-party hawk's view, I would say, where we can analyze what government is saying, what opposition is trying to say, and which argument is slightly more reliable and credible. So over to you, Ajay.
Thank you very much, Sandeep, and thank you for stepping in that moment of frozen, with no referral or reference to Disney at all there. Right, Michael, so I think it was an interesting time for you to get frozen. With the response the way it's been so far, which has kept New Zealanders safe health-wise, and it has kept us safe financially as well, with the wage subsidies and all the other things that have been brought out to kind of tackle this situation. How do you think it's going to play out in the upcoming elections for you guys, as well as what is the possibility that the opposition can dig some of those advantages out from under your feet?
Well, of course, how it goes ultimately.
Yeah, but you can have a go.
Well, look, I've got one vote, same as everyone else. But look, largely what I hear from people, and until Wednesday, I was pretty busy getting out and about in my electorate, door knocking, visiting people at the shops and getting feedback. And people really admire the leadership of the Prime Minister. They like the fact that, as Sandeep just said, that the leadership has been, despite the fact that we're in incredibly turbulent, uncharted territory, the Prime Minister's and the government's leadership has been calm, it's been reassuring, and it's been decisive, and it's focused on looking after the needs of people at an unsettling and difficult time. And so I think the fact that we've continued through that approach, we've kept calm, kept making good decisions when we've had the second round, I think is reassuring for people. And I think what people have seen is that we've also had a responsible approach. So you mentioned the wage subsidy before. Now, because we made the decision a little while ago to hold back about $15 billion of expenditure in case there was a second wave, we've got the ability now to extend the wage subsidy and put in other measures to make sure that we support people. And
those in the know were always saying, look, they're keeping this up their sleeve for the elections because you don't know what you're going to need just before. So I think good move on the government's part. But can we actually get through this and still be able to do it the other side of the election? How much money will there be
100%.
left then?
I have total confidence that as a country we'll get through this, and that we'll do well through this process, and that we can continue to manage the situation. We haven't, as I say, we've held back about $15 billion of expenditure from the initial $50 billion that we allocated, because we said that as I said earlier, we can't quite be sure what's around the corner. We paid down a lot of debt earlier on because we said there might be a rainy day. Well, this is a rainy day, and we've been able to put up the umbrella. So that's an important part of the economic leadership that Grant Robertson and the government has provided. And the other thing that I've got great confidence in is the resilience and the adaptability of New Zealand workers and businesses, because what we've seen through this period over the last few months of massive uncertainty of the full level 4 lockdown is that with some support from the government, people have found ways to get through. People have generally worked well with one another. People have adapted and pivoted. And we're actually seeing an economy that, despite the predictions of many people at the beginning, has actually held in there pretty well. Now, let's be clear, there are businesses and jobs that haven't been able to survive. But we've done far better than most people predicted at the beginning of this, because we kept the virus out, because we got back to normality pretty quickly, because we had the government support, but also because Kiwis are really good when we're in a tight spot at working together. And so I've got great confidence that whatever might come next year, we'll be able to push through as a country.
So in a yes or no response, if that's possible, is the government still able to ride its COVID response and that umbrella in hand into an election victory?
Well, look, obviously that's what I hope.
That was not a yes or no response.
So yes, I guess is the answer.
So sorry, what was the answer again?
Well, the answer is yes. We're seeking an election victory, and there are a whole range of issues that people will look to. But the COVID response is obviously top of mind for people. So we're going to keep focused on having a strong response that looks after people, that keeps people safe, and that ensures that we can get back to normality as soon as possible.
Let's look at a crystal ball. Let's say you guys get back in. As a coalition or on your own, all those things are up for debate. How do you keep the economy and the country going in what is going to be possibly a 2 or 3 year period if there are no vaccines of any worth? How do you think your government, the Labour Party in particular, will figure this out?
Yeah, that's one of the best questions I've been asked in an interview recently, because the world is potentially going to be a very different place. And the answer is that there are a range of responses. So one of them is ensuring that we keep our international connections strong. While we don't have much inbound or outbound tourism at the moment, the government behind the scenes, led by David Parker, has actually done a huge amount of work to make sure that we keep up our international trading connections during this difficult period. So we've actually, in some of our key sectors, for example, our food production, we've actually been doing quite well over the last few months, because the world still needs New Zealand's high quality food to keep people fed. So we can keep our economy going by making sure that we keep those international connections going. We can keep going by making sure that we continue to support businesses through an uncertain period, whether that's through the wage subsidy scheme, the interest-free small business loan scheme, whether it's through the mentoring support, that the support we've given small businesses to transition to having more of their activities online. There are a whole lot of things like this, a whole lot of measures that we've put in place to make sure that we can be adaptable.
Can we afford a 4th wage subsidy after this?
Well, look, we will do whatever we have to do to make sure that New Zealand gets through. And here's one important point I'll make, that as we came into this
We'll just
period,
end up being beholden to the IMF and all the big banks around the world, and they'll just want to, they'll do to us what they did to Greece not so long ago.
well, here's the important point. As New Zealand came into this crisis, because of our responsible economic management, we'd got our net debt down to less than 20% of GDP, one of the lowest in the world. Now, at the moment, if by the time you've taken into account the $50 billion that we're investing in the response, by the end of that, our net debt will still be lower as a percentage of GDP than most countries were at the beginning. So we've actually given ourselves the headroom to be able to make the investments that we need to keep New Zealanders secure and safe and to keep the economy going. And we've got the capacity to do that because we were responsible and paid down debt during the good times. I want New Zealanders to understand that we've got the ability to get through this.
So you reckon we will be able to paddle our way out of it? That's a good positive outlook to have. I'm definitely wanting to buy into that. Let's see how many people are buying into that in the elections itself. Now, last but not least, you were campaigning pretty hard and fast till the second lockdown came into force. How are things in Mount India?
Look, my predecessor Phil Goff used to call this the holy city of Mount Roskill, and
yes,
and I love my connection with the Indian community within my electorate, along with other communities as well. Look, things have been going really well. There's a lot of support there on the ground for the Labour Party and the work that we've been doing, both in terms of the COVID response, but also in terms of tackling some of the bigger long-term challenges that are still going to be there as we make our way through COVID-19.
What are they? What are they? What do you hear from the people on when you're out beating the pavement?
Oh, look, the response to COVID remains the number one issue, particularly ensuring that people have decent jobs and incomes. So that's the number one issue, without any doubt. But some of those underlying issues are still there. Our response to climate change, ensuring that we have a strong response to the long-running housing crisis in New Zealand, making sure that our local schools are in good condition and people have got great healthcare. All of those core issues are still important issues for New Zealand.
Do you run into any temporary migrant workers who are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, living in that part of the city?
Yes, definitely. This is clearly one of those, the temporary migrant community is clearly one of the communities who's had a really difficult time in New Zealand, but actually all around the world because of the uncertainties of COVID and the way it's affected international borders in particular. So that's something we continue to work on. There's no magic bullet to it. But I've, before Level 3 came into place, I'd arranged for our Minister of Immigration, the Honourable Chris Farfoy, to come up to Auckland to meet with some of the groups to work through some of those difficult issues to make sure that we are providing as much support as we can in this uncertain period.
Is the approach a lot more proactive now? I mean, we talked to him about a couple of weeks ago, but he'd only been in the job less than a few days. And so he didn't really have anything locked down or concrete going on.
Well, that's right. Look, I think at that stage, and I saw that interview, he was pretty fresh into the role. He's been working through that, but he's a very effective minister who really does break things down and work out how you.
So have you guys discussed something that could help these temporary migrant workers? Because there's a lot of pain out there in the community.
Well, I think the issues are pretty well understood and they're on the table. So, for example, what do we do about people whose visas might be expiring in the coming period? What do we do about temporary people on temporary visas who are currently stuck overseas?
See, the people who are in it, they don't think of it being on the table. They think they're on the chopping block with their necks on it. And it's really difficult for them. So surely the government, even for the ones onshore, forget about the ones offshore, no news, nothing to be said before the election?
To be said. So we've made changes to the Immigration Act to ensure that there can be greater flexibility. We've made sure that there is support in terms of the basics that people might need if they've lost their job, so they can get food or they can get support for their accommodation. So we have worked within the system to try and make sure that we provide the things that people in those communities need. But we know that it's still a very challenging situation because of the international lockdown, because of the changed labour market that people are working within. And we know that there needs to be further dialogue there and probably further work in terms of the policy.
I think clarity around their status and not worrying about being evicted, for want of a better word, from their, like it would be in the case of a rental property, would be a very good place to start.
In terms of the response, is that we've set up the fund to support people on temporary visas, which will provide financial support for people's accommodation needs if they're getting into trouble. So I would encourage people to come forward and access that support. It's there for that. It's there if they don't have enough money to pay the food bill or the other essentials of life. So we're trying to make sure that even though that's not a permanent solution, that in the meantime, people's basic needs can be cared for.
For the benefit of those who might have tuned in, where should they go?
Where they should go is they should work through MSD. If they're having any problems, come and talk to your local MP's office, and we'll make sure that you get the support you need.
Yeah, that's a much often repeated line, but they seem to be, falling on deaf ears. A lot of people writing in, going to their MPs and stuff as well. But maybe I'll ask them to come and see you, Michael.
Well, look, my door's open to any of. Well, actually, my door's not open at the moment because the office is closed. But my email inbox and my electorate office phone number are open for anyone who has those problems. So we have been distributing tens of millions of dollars in support through that fund for temporary people on temporary visas, and we'll continue providing that support. So if anyone's having any problems with it, please do let us know. Like I said, I know that doesn't fix the broader problems about visas that might be expiring, about people who are sort of caught in job categories where there isn't work at the moment. There's further work to be done there, we know, but we have put the support in place to make sure that the basics of life can be looked after for people in the meantime.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and for fronting up to being grilled on this subject and others. I think it's a bit like the banks giving everybody a holiday. Just give them an amnesty to stay on till this thing settles down. That's what the word on the street is. And we hope that you'll be able to take it across to Chris Fafoe and others in the cabinet.
Thank you. Look, I'll certainly put that in and the other solutions that have been put forward to me to him when I have that discussion. And please rest assured, we've tried to have people's back through this crisis. We've done well as a country, and we're going to keep that approach front and centre as we make our way through the next stage.
Thank you very much. And one more acknowledgement for you, Michael. It's been a while since I saw you, and you've just stepped in at the last minute because we had a cancellation of another minister who shall stay unnamed at this point. And thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute and for giving us all this time.
No problem. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and my best wishes to everyone. Can I also acknowledge last minute thing? This weekend, of course, we would have usually been celebrating Indian Independence Day at wonderful celebrations across Auckland and New Zealand, and that hasn't been able to happen. So Jai Hind, and my very best wishes to everyone who will be celebrating Indian Independence Day at their homes.
So I'm going to give you a challenge. Next time, we'll see if you can actually learn the national anthem.
That's a good challenge. I hope that my re-election is not going to depend on it, but I'll do my best to get a few lines.
If you need help, I'll send you the YouTube clips.
Thank you, Ajay.
With a translation underneath it, subtitles. Well, thank you very much once again. That was Michael Wood, the MP from Mount Roskill, and we really appreciate your time. Have a great Sunday, what's left of it. Thank you very much again. So, we are going to be looking at other news and also going to go live to Sandeep Singh, editor, Indian Weekender, to have a chinwag, chew the cud, and to generally have a discussion about this week's topics. But I think we've kind of gone a little bit over time. So, Sandeep, what I might do is just bring you in, and we'll keep other things which we discussed earlier, like the Dhoni retirement announcement, for another time. So welcome back.
Time management is also an important challenge, and we need to be able to do that as well. So
I'm going to put this one squarely in your lap, because you said if you want them to stay, ask them an interesting question. And then I did. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? I shouldn't have asked that question.
Sure, and I was seeing that your question probably Michael was enjoying a lot, and yeah, I think, and that's what probably has taken a lot of time, but which is a good thing. It's not a bad problem to have. It's a good thing to have
Yes.
when we have some good eclectic discussions with our politicians, some grilling, some probing, and some fun as well. And I can see that you are having a good fun with Michael, so that's a good thing.
Michael's always been a good sort to have in for an interview. He's to me, he is a little bit more genuine than some other people out there. We won't name who. And he's very
And
close
that
to the
I will
Indian
leave it.
community.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I won't comment any more on that. I will leave it as your personal opinion. As an Indian weekender, well, we are excited to talk to everyone equally.
Don't worry, I don't think we're going to piss anybody off. But I haven't taken any
Sure.
names. So, what did you think? I mean, the government has a very almost a moribund response to this whole thing. It's all shaped. The narrative is shaped. None of the other ministers actually stepping out of line from that shaped narrative. Um, and it's generally working for Kiwis. It's working for us in terms of the fact that we have very low cases and the economy's still there, ticking along. But could we hope for more? Should we hope for more?
So just to clarify, when you say moribund response, we are talking about the second wave of COVID. Are we
No,
keeping that
I
focus?
mean the PR around their actions and the COVID response. It's very much everybody gathers around everybody and they toe the party line. Um, and there's no independent thought going into it beyond what has already been discussed or decided as a narrative.
Well, probably I might want to differ here over here is Ajay, that the
Sure.
thing is that that's how probably all political parties they work. Actually, they explore new ideas, they contest those new ideas within
Hmm.
themselves, and once they choose those ideas, be it as a party, be it as a government of a coalition, or be it in opposition, they choose to stick by those ideas regardless. So I don't think probably we can expect anything different from this government,
Yes.
or because that has been the norm, that is a normally accepted norm with all, I would say, political democracies. Rarely, very rarely, we do see MPs and politicians uh,
Step out of
uh,
line.
going over the line and crossing the line as well on some of the issues on which probably they are very passionate and committed to. But again,
Hmm.
yeah, that's the nature of politics.
And what did you feel about Mr. Wood's response to their ability I guess he said a yes, that they would be able to ride this election on the back of this COVID response?
Well, again, I would have been surprised if it had been said otherwise. Well, all politicians, regardless of whatever the latest polls are telling them, regardless of where they are currently, be in government or be in opposition, one
Hmm.
thing that will be you will be finding it absolute uniformity is their absolute confidence in being elected again and being in the government.
Yes.
So I have to still come across any politician even in opposition who would say, look, I want to be elected and remain in opposition. So giving a benefit of doubt to Michael, he is in government and he would definitely love to go back. But having said that, well, that was the fun part of this interview, AJ. But I think probably today's interview with Michael was at a very critical time. Today is Sunday. Tomorrow we know that Prime Minister Ardern will be taking a decision about postponement of election or not. This
Hmm.
is one of the hot topics. Last week we were busy on handling the second wave,
Hmm.
and as you know, that when that issue emanated on Tuesday, there were two issues. They were quickly raised by opposition. A, how we are going to manage this second wave.
Hmm.
The allegations of poor border management and poor preparation that opposition raised, plus more importantly about the delaying or the postponement of the elections, which was the big questions. So the way Prime Minister Ardern had handled that issue last week was that he sidestepped on the question of delaying of elections, keeping the focus on more on planning the next steps on how to manage that second wave. So we see
Hmm.
that lockdown was extended for 2 weeks, and alert level status 2 was maintained throughout the country. So that was the focus for last week. But coming this Monday, we will see that what does cabinet and the prime minister decides eventually on the elections. And talking about the government's response or the cabinet's response, just letting you know, and your readers, your viewers who are watching this interview live, know that just when you started your interview at 4 o'clock, at that time, Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who is also the leader of New Zealand First Party, they have issued a press release where they have mentioned, they have actually told very clearly that New Zealand First is of the opinion that Prime Minister should be delaying the elections. And he has released a letter that their party have sent to Prime Minister Ardern on 14th of August. So a lot of politics happening in this important 1 hour when you are entering Michael Wood. So we know the opinions and the views of different parties. We know National want it to be delayed without fail.
I think both parties who are not polling well will want some breathing space.
And that is basically regardless of where they are, either in opposition or in government.
Yes.
So this is an interesting time, and I think Prime Minister Ardern would have to take a lot of calculations to take. Because
I think the Prime Minister hinted at this in that first announcement when they went with the 3-day lockdown, or just after they came out of the that, to be able to say what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and extended by 12 days, mentioned the fact that the Electoral Commission had, in fact, got some kind of methodology in place for being able to hold the elections even in a level 2 scenario.
I would not say that was a hint as per. It was more a rebuttal to what opposition leader Judith Collins was trying to say. Like Opposition National, by that time, they have said that Electoral Commission have got no capabilities or capacity to hold elections. And that's their main line, which we know that now New Zealand First have also told, and all of the parties who are wanting to delay it, they are saying that by having election on the due date, which is 19th of September, probably there will not be enough time for all the parties to go out and do campaigning. Plus, Aucklanders in particular won't have, I would say, what they're trying to say is that they won't have, and not only Aucklanders, rather entire New Zealanders, they're alleging that they might not feel confidence to go out and vote, which will be an impediment to New Zealand democracy. So that's a line of argument. And at that time, probably Prime Minister Ardern was trying to rebut that argument by saying that Electoral Commission has already worked to develop capacities to put and cast their vote even in alert level 2. But again, there was no decision as such. She has asked for 48 hours, and the rest of the nation, it is looking forward to Prime Minister's press conference tomorrow sometime when we will come to know what's happening with elections.
So I won't ask you to be a betting man and tell me one way or the other. That's fine. We understand. Last but not least, and we have to wind up after this, your reaction to MS Dhoni announcing a retirement from international cricket on Independence Day.
Dhoni has lived up to his reputation, and I was reading an article, actually, Dhoni is a man that you think you know, but you never know, and only he knows himself. So that was a very interesting article I read about him, and they have actually brought together many facts that, this man has audacity, I would say, and unconventionalness of doing things. So Dhoni is basically known in cricketing field for being one of the most unconventional cricketers.
Yes, unpredictable, able to read the opposition like no one else.
An unconventional skipper as well, unconventional field placement. I know probably you, all your viewers will know that many times probably people, they have said that his post-retirement work should be write a book on how he do this unconventional field placement as well.
Yes.
So he has lived up to his reputation quite well, being unconventional till last day, because we don't know why he chose to retire on that day in that style. That only Dhoni knows. But anyways, having said that, that decision was long expected. It is only when it comes to 4, it bring all your sadness and everything. But it was long due. So, look forward to the position that would be created, a new talent that will be coming in. And as they say, the show must go on. So Indian cricket will also move on.
Yes, and the next chapter in his life would be interesting as well. I'm sure he's not going to just sit back on his laurels. And one more last thing, he was also known for his unconventional cricketing shots, that particularly that helicopter shot?
Definitely. As I said, so yeah, he did justice to his reputation that he's created in the cricketing world, remaining unconventional to the last ball he faced.
So, from an unconventional scenario and probably an unpredictable scenario of the COVID-19 world, and the unconventional Captain Cool, who is not going to be playing cricket for India internationally anymore, we would like to say our goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us, Sandeep. Have a great Sunday, what's left of it. और आप सब लोगों से भी इजाजत चाहेंगे. आप सब अपना ख्याल रखें जहां भी हैं. Safe रहें, स्वस्थ रहें. I'm your host Ajay Vasisht with the Weekender on Sunday. I will see you next Sunday in, for now, Abhi Bhi, the safest country दुनिया भर में. Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. Till next time, do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and we'll see you again, same time next week.